Welcome to this Ivy Life Thought Leadership Program. We're delighted on this webinar to welcome Dr. Marlena Corcoran, who is the founder of Athena Mentor, International University Admissions Counseling, which is based in Munich, Germany, and New York. For the past 15 years, Athena Mentor has advised both American and international students on successful admission to the world's great universities. Marlena has held research appointments at Brown, Harvard, Princeton, Oxford, and the National Center for Scientific Research in Paris. And she knows from the inside many of the universities to which your teenagers may aspire. Marlena is the author of Year by Year to College and the Athena Mentor College Application Workbook. She was recently asked by Harvard's Business Review's Ascend project to create a series of videos on MBA admissions, which are appearing now on hbrascend.org. So welcome, Dr. Corcoran. It's so wonderful to have you here on this webinar, and I'm delighted to learn about the college admissions process.
Thank you, Chris. If you would start the slides.
I will do that right now. And just tell me when you want me to advance, and I will do so.
The owl you see is the owl of Minerva and also the totem animal of Athena Mentor International University Admissions Counseling. Would you go to the next screen, please, Chris? I'd like to encourage all of you to get in touch with me if you have further questions. Anyone on this call is more than welcome to email me to set up a complimentary half-hour consultation about the specific questions you might have about your children and about Athena Mentor. Next slide. Well, I'm sure we all remember when we were the new generation at great schools like Dartmouth. That's Dartmouth in the photo for those of you who have never ventured north of Boston. For the current rising generation, things are much, much different than they were for us in college admissions. And as Chris said himself, we all find ourselves wondering, would I ever have been admitted today? And who are they admitting? Next slide. Let's look at some statistics, because rather than just subject ourselves to fear-mongering and hiding in a corner, let's try a little analysis. The first column is the admit rate for regular decision? No, it's the general admit rate. So for Harvard, it was 4.5. For Columbia, you might be surprised that Columbia was the second most difficult Ivy League university to get into last year. The column next to it is the admit rate for regular decision. It's very important to break down the statistics that we find. So while the general admit rate for Harvard was 4.5%, in regular decision it was only 2.8. The next column is the admit rate for early decision or early action, and you can see that that is substantially higher. There are important reasons for this that are beyond anyone's control, well, unless you start training your son or daughter to be a star quarterback from birth, because these statistics include the admit rate for athletes, recruited athletes. So that accounts in part for the higher numbers. But you can guess, just looking down that column, that if your child has any inclination to one of the Ivies to which your child would be willing to commit and forsake all others, there are considerable advantages to applying early decision or early action. Harvard, Princeton, and Yale all do early action which does not commit the applicant, it commits the school. However, if your child is waffling between, well, will it be Penn or will it be Dartmouth? You might go over these statistics together. And when parents ask me, well, Dr. Corcoran, how do you do it? My child listens to you and does not listen to me. And all my child has to do is talk to you for an hour, and suddenly he or she sees the wisdom of a certain course of action. Honestly, I show them the numbers in a very neutral manner, not in a scare manner, not in an overly scientific manner, but I think that anyone could look at these sets of numbers and already understand something about the reality of Ivy admissions today. Next slide, please. So the early decision schools are Columbia, Brown, Penn, Dartmouth, and Cornell. What's, to my mind, a bit shocking about early decision in the Ivy League is that these universities fill about half of their incoming class with students who have applied early decision. Half the seats in the class are filled by the time regular decision rolls around. So again, talk with your child about the realities of early decision. Next slide. In line with my practice of presenting things in a neutral manner so that there's something we can understand rather than just fall into a pit of despair over, I highly recommend that you inform yourselves by doing an internet search. Just type in common data set name of college. Here we're going to use a university that's in the news today, the University of Southern California. We'll just step outside the Ivies for a moment. If you find the common data set for the University of Southern California, you can see the answer to that common question, what are they looking for? Every college publishes the data in their common data set. It's just that most people don't know how to look for it or where to look for it, or even that the common data set exists. So I hope that you already feel that in attending this webinar, you have learned something important. And if you want to know what's important to USC, well, look at the chart. What's very important to them is the rigor of secondary school record. That is, how difficult are the classes a child chose to take? Class rank, not so much. Academic GPA, yes. Standardized test scores, yes. The essay and the recommendations, yes. Now you'll notice that something that teenagers tend to think is extremely important, namely internships and extracurricular activities. They're important, but they will not outweigh a person's academic performance. Just yesterday, a mother said to me, well, I know that my child never took economics and wants to apply for an economics program. Is that going to be a problem? Because after all, she's doing a wonderful internship now on her gap year in climate change. And I explained that even the most glamorous of internships on the hottest of topics isn't quite the same as academic performance. Are there ways to make up for this? Yes, definitely. If you haven't taken, say, the required mathematics course for what you want to study at university, you can do it online. So there are ways to deal with this, but it's important first to have some numerical sense of what's going on. Let's look at the next slide. This is once again the University of Southern California, breaking down the statistics about standardized tests in a way that will be more fine-grained so that you know in more detail what you're looking at, instead of just looking at an average of the standardized test scores. you can look at the common data set and see it broken down, see what percentage of the incoming class or the offers that were made have certain statistics. And you might even be surprised that at the University of Southern California, virtually the entire class had at least a 600 on their SAT math score and also the reading and writing score. So yes, there are a few outliers, and I'm always asked about outliers. Those people tend to have a skill or a talent in, say, art or music. They're the best violinist in the world, or they do a kind of art and the standardized test just doesn't capture that aspect of the child. Those are the outliers. Or they come from, oh, I remember a case we were asked to study as part of training for interviewing people at Brown. The teenager grew up on a Navajo reservation, and so her access to test prep was pretty low. So the outliers will be people like that. So I hope that you will use the common data set in doing your research. Next slide, please. So that's the situation, and in the famous words of Lenin now, what is to be done? You look at those scores and you say, but they're stratospheric. I would say the first thing you need to remember is that when you were applying to college, grade inflation had not quite taken over to the point it has now. So there are some things that mitigate the dreadful picture of statistics for admission to top universities. And there are also definite things that you can do. What I would suggest is that you don't restrict yourself to more of the same, higher test scores, more AP courses, but rather think of how to differentiate oneself from the crowd, how to stand out in a crowd of students who all have near perfect grades and near perfect test scores. Next slide. A young person has to find a path that is distinctively her own or his own. And I realize that that can be seen as another kind of pressure on today's teenagers. So what I would suggest is that if a person starts early, it seems like much less of an emergency to decide what to do with one's life. That's why when I say that it's a good idea to start thinking of college in 9th grade, I don't mean you have to start studying like a maniac 24 hours a day in 9th grade. But a 9th grader can start exploring possible interests. And there are only 3 summers. The summer after 9th grade, in which a person could try completely new things. The summer after 10th grade, in which a person might take courses or learn things or deepen their knowledge about possible directions, all leading up to the summer after 11th grade, where it is rather expected that the person do something original, create something, draw something, write something, not just take more classes where you soak things in, or more internships where you follow someone around, but do something that expresses you, something that will be different at the end of the summer because you did it. Next slide. Extracurriculars are something about which I'm often asked, what are the best extracurriculars for my child? Or what are the extracurricular activities that really impress an admissions committee? Here I have some cautionary words, and they are that the most glamorous sounding extracurriculars may not be the ones that are most important to an admissions committee. If you are sincerely interested in something, the best thing to do is to do it, not pursue someone else who does it, or not to try out pretending that you're a hedge fund analyst by taking an internship in what the committee will probably is assume the office of a friend of your parents, but to do something that really means something to you. The other way to understand impressive extracurriculars is, next slide please, what in the UK they often call supercurriculars. That is, you take an academic subject that interests a teenager and push that beyond what they are going to do in school. The whole idea is to break the box of school. It's very tempting, especially at boarding school or at one of the very best secondary schools, to get so wrapped up in achievements at school that teenagers forget that there's a world beyond the walls of their school. So do something above and beyond what is required of you in class, and perhaps even than what's available to you at school. Next slide. How can parents help? I know that you're here this evening because you're sincerely interested in the lives of your teenagers and what you could possibly do to help them in life. And I'd like to make 2 suggestions. Next slide. One is to volunteer yourself. Set a good example. And a specific kind of volunteering I would recommend, if you really want to know what's going on in admissions today, is volunteer to interview for your alma mater. Now, the year before, the year in which your child applies, you're not eligible. I think the reasons for that are obvious. It's very hard to escape one's bias in favor of one's own child. But your own university will probably train you in how to interview and what's important to ask. You'll also get a sense of what's out there. So you could bring that knowledge home as examples and as a standard to which you might suggest your own child aspire. Next. The second thing I'd recommend is a staycation. I had to come up with one word, like volunteer, to express how important it is that your family stay close to home in the years that your child or children are in 11th and 12th grade. I know that many of you are in a position to offer your families wonderful excursions to faraway places, whether they be culturally interesting, you might want to go to Japan, or whether they are magnificently relaxing. Costa Rica leaps to mind as very popular these days, but it's hard on your kids. You may think you're giving them something wonderful, and in itself, such a trip is wonderful. But it breaks my heart to see kids jet lagged on the first day of school, jet lagged on the day that they take the SAT or the ACT, trying desperately to finish their essays and their applications when their parents, I've literally heard this in the background, hurry up, the plane is leaving for Costa Rica. So please, if you really want to do something for your kids, make their background lives more supportive in these years that are difficult and challenging for them. It will also give them a sense of how to put first things first. Next. The most important purpose and result of the path to college is that your teenager discover the answer to the questions, who am I and what do I really care about? The questions that the colleges ask on the Common Application, on their own applications, are all designed to elicit a thoughtful response from your teenager. They're not just exercises in forcing people to write until they drop in their senior year of high school. They're designed to say, who are you? And what would you like to tell us about yourself? Now, by the time you're as old as I am, or that you are, nobody much cares who we really are or what our deepest thoughts are. But honestly, admissions committees are sitting around the table hoping to find a thoughtful, intriguing, and convincing response, something that really lights up their day and says, this person cares about something. Furthermore, you can help your kids by not asking, how can my child get into Princeton? But what's the right university for the person your child really is? I'd like us all to do some soul searching on that point and realize the Ivies are wonderful places and they're not the only wonderful universities. My mission is to support young people in discovering who they are and what they care about. Because once they find that driving wheel, they will go for it, and the world will be the better for it, no matter where they go to university. Next slide. I'm Dr. Marlena Corcoran, and if you'd be interested in learning more about Athena Mentor, for example, through our free newsletter, I write about such topics every week. And I've been asked, do I really write the newspaper? Who writes my newspaper? Well, I write my newsletter. And I write about whatever is important for applicants or even for younger students to be thinking about that week, or what I'm thinking about that week. Sometimes I write about the books that I'm reading because I'm always bothering teenagers to read, so I tell them about what I'm reading. I would love to see you for one of the half-hour consultations. I welcome you to the Athena Mentor family, and I hope that you will sign up for the newsletter and ask your questions both now and afterwards.
Well, wonderful. Thank you, Marlena. That was a really great presentation. I want to ask before we open the floor to questions, how do we subscribe to your newsletter? Because I would like to do that. Can we go to athenamentor.com and click on a link and subscribe?
That's right.
Okay.
There should be a pop-up button, and you're very welcome to email me directly. I'm in the process of shifting over my website, and not everything works perfectly.
Okay.
So you'd be welcome to email me directly.
Perfect. And
There's also a free ebook on offer as part of signing up for the newsletter. It's directed at international students, and it's called The 10 Biggest Mistakes International Students Make When Applying to U.S. Colleges. But I suspect that even if you have relatively well-informed American teenagers, there'd be something to learn.
excellent. So we did have a question in the chat window, and it is, could you please provide us with examples of supercurriculars?
I was just delighted that one of the students at Hunter College High School, my own alma mater, was in the news. I think this was a couple of years ago, for winning a $250,000 scholarship for his research on transmission of some kind of spores in various agricultural regions of, it was potato blight. And he used statistics from Israel. And interestingly enough, it was in the field of biology, but there were no experiments involving frogs or anybody else. He did it strictly with data. There are competitions And thank you for asking this question, because something that means a lot to admissions committees is competitions. In effect, having won a competition does part of the committee's work for it. It's like pre-vetting the student. So if your student can win admission to, say, the Ross program in mathematics, or the summer program in science at the Rockefeller Institute in Manhattan, or similarly prestigious and selective summer programs, those are always great.
Very good question. So it looks like we have 21 people who are participating here. So I'm sure that some of you have questions. In case you joined late, I did mute everyone because we were experiencing some background noise, but you can unmute yourself if you're participating online. If you dialed in, I have to unmute you. So looks like there's only one dial-in phone participant, which is a 617 number. I'm going to unmute that number in case that person has a question. And anyone else that has a question can unmute themselves.
I've got one for you. My son is a senior. We've been looking at the Ivies. He's won all kinds of awards and his academics are great and all that. But he's having a hellacious problem coming up with a subject for the essay. We're from a small town. He has no particular passions. He just loves to learn. Any thoughts on what we can do to improve or at least focus him on what that could be?
That actually sounds like an attractive profile, because not all that many people from small towns apply. So the important thing is focus on immediately what is in front of him. Don't think that the essay has to be on a trip somewhere else. They want to know, what is it really like to live in a small town? I think they'd be interested to know. And it sounds like living in a small town, he nevertheless has a very big imagination. So the space he lives in is not defined by his geography, but by his imagination. Second, I have a practical suggestion for all of you, which is, kids often get stuck on that big first essay, and they think, well, my whole life is writing on this one essay. So, okay, don't write that one first. The supplement essays on the Common Application ask more targeted questions. It's easier for a teenager to answer those. They should also be specifically directed at the school that's asking them, because the secret question behind every supplement prompt is, why us? Why are you applying to our school? And digging into the details of what's available at that school and why your son would want to do that, why he would want to wake up in the morning and take the classes he would take at that school, that's an easier place to get started. And the answers to half a dozen of those questions start to come together into a picture that the teenager can see of himself or herself. And at that point, it's easier to write the main essay.
Great advice. Who else has questions? We still have 25 minutes of this acclaimed expert on college admissions. So this is your chance to ask questions.
May I?
Of course.
Hi, yeah, this is Bob Fishman. I'm assisting a young lady who recently lost her father. She has an exceptional record, although, as the doctor has commented, there are many hundreds, if not thousands, of equally capable students. And the mother has limited English capability. So I'm trying to mentor her some. There's a perception. Are you able to comment on financial aid? There's a perception in the household that they may have too much in order to qualify. Are these colleges, whether Ivy League or other top schools of top reputation, likely to offer merit or other type of financial aid? Can you comment in general on how that might work?
First, may I express my condolences to the young woman. This happened to me when I was in college as well. My father passed away. Since she is still in secondary school,
Yeah, just starting senior year.
as a practical suggestion, I would suggest that you go to the Princeton website. There is a calculator there that will ask for financial information from the family. It's completely confidential, and will give you a rough estimate of what the estimated family's contribution would be. It's one of the most friendly, informative, and fast ways to get an estimate of what it would cost the student at a university that has generous financial aid to give. There are other calculators on the websites of other colleges. In fact, I think it's even a regulation now that colleges must provide this. It's an estimate. It's not a final judgment, but I think that would put her mind at ease, because even if the expected contribution is higher than the family would like to hear, and often it is, it's better to know. Furthermore, there are websites. One is called fastweb.com that lists scholarships, and they send, I signed up for their newsletter. They send me information every week on available scholarships. But most scholarship money does not come from outside foundations. It comes from the colleges themselves. So concentrate on that. The fact of the matter is that the very best universities tend to be the wealthiest. There's a relation between the university's endowment and what it can offer as aid to students. The university can't give money it doesn't have. So oddly enough, a student in that position would be well advised to do her very best in school and try to get into one of those universities, because there, the hard part is not paying for it. The hard part is getting in.
Well, isn't it true that most, and maybe now all of the Ivies are need blind, in the sense that if you get in, they'll find a way for you to be able to pay for it? Isn't that
Not
a
100%. I
okay?
don't think all of
Princeton definitely did that, because
them.
they sent us, all the alumni, this big announcement that if you get in, we're going to help you pay for it no matter what.
That's right.
And it was, I think a lot of others followed suit. I couldn't remember which ones, but
I do know the statistics for Harvard, that if a family makes less than $60,000 a year, they pay nothing. And for most students entering Harvard, they pay less than they would pay at their own state university.
it's great. So
Which is kind of shocking.
It
So
is. A quick follow-up on the Princeton calculator, though. I just want to clarify. Is that useful? Would that be a good proxy for most of these elite schools, or do we need to go to a separate calculator for each and every school?
Go to a separate one.
Okay.
I just find the Princeton one particularly user-friendly. I'd also like to mention that in the Wall Street Journal college rankings for 2020, I was there last Wednesday when the rankings were announced. One of the figures that astonished me was on the page where they analyze best buys. That is the most financially advantageous universities. They do this by dividing the, I think it's the average salary divided by the cost. And place one was Berea in Kentucky, and it's hard to argue with their model, but it's very special. Places 2, 3, and 4 went to the City College of New York.
Wow.
So I don't know if you're calling from New York, but honestly, City College is a great institution.
Good to know. So more questions. We still have 20 minutes. We have Dr. Corcoran for 20 more minutes. And so far, these questions have been great.
Hi, I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, hi, my name is Juliet. My mom can't watch this seminar with me, so I just wanted to watch it to ask a question about my own application because I am a senior this year. And I don't know if you guys have heard about QuestBridge, but I am applying through QuestBridge and through the National College Match. And have started my application, and then last year I applied through the junior program, which was the QuestBridge Scholar program, and I got in there, and then I'm now doing the National College Match. I just wanted to ask a question about how much they're going to be holistic about my application for the top schools, because I just took the SAT and I got a 1340, and that's not the score that I wanted to get, but I have really a great GPA, and I'm involved in a lot of extracurriculars, and am framing my application in a way to tell my story. And I think that encompasses my passion and my future plans in a really really good way. I just wanted to know how much they're going to take my SAT score into account for the application process.
Juliet, you have to try, and it's worth trying. There's not much you can do about that one aspect of your application. You shouldn't dwell on it. You're doing the right thing by building the rest of the application to be as strong as you can make it. Now, there are some universities, and I think immediately of the University of Washington at Seattle. Great school. People love it. In fact, Germans love it so much that there's a legend, at least, that UW had to put a cap on the number of Germans who were applying to study medicine at UW. Now, that's a state that doesn't have a lot of money to do holistic applications, so they rely largely on numbers. But the schools to which you may be applying, if they say they do holistic applications, they do. So I wish you the best of luck.
Thank you so much.
Yes, thank you. It's great to have an incoming college student asking a question. Thank you. I see Jim Manley had raised his hand. Jim, would you like to ask a question? He had electronically raised his hand, I should say. Let me see. I'm gonna unmute
Juliet,
you.
I have one more observation for you. Have you used Khan Academy?
Yeah, I have, and I studied the entire summer this past summer, and I'm taking practice tests. I'm taking the SAT actually again in October, which is the last one that I can take. That would be when I'm applying to all the colleges that I am, and so I want to get my score up, try at least 100 points. So yeah, I'm using Khan Academy to
I think Khan Academy is great. I've used it myself to brush up on skills. One tip is that there are 2 stages to SAT prep. One is, in effect, content, to make sure you know how to answer each type of question one by one. The second stage is stamina. It's a very long test, as you know by now. It's not a sprint, it's a marathon. So one thing you can do to help yourself is to take full-length tests and really time yourself harshly. Don't let yourself run over. the only way to build up those stamina muscles is to exercise them. So you still have time to take at least 2 full-length tests, and that may be the aspect of your performance that can push you over the top to your goal.
Thank you. I wanted to ask if you had any, other than Khan Academy, if there's any other books that I should buy to, because I know that Khan Academy, it's a lot of practice, but the trouble I'm having is finding out the ways to answer each individual question, like you said. If there were any like practice books, or like especially even for math, how to answer each individual question.
That's a good question, Juliet. And there, I find the Princeton Review books to be very closely calibrated to the level of difficulty of the test itself, and that they give really clear explanations of why the right answer is right, not only why the wrong answers are wrong. And in your case, I would read through every single explanation and not just say, okay, I got number 2 right, next. No, take the time to go to the back of the book where the explanations are given and read the explanation for every possible answer, the right ones and the wrong ones. And you'll find that they fall into logical categories. If you were writing the test, you'd rapidly run out of ways to create wrong answers. And there are only certain ways to be wrong. I know it's hard to take this in quickly, but basically the logical errors are the answer's too big, it's too small, it's exaggerated, or it's correct but beside the point. And those can often be the ones that really trip people up, because the answer is right, it's just irrelevant.
I don't know if
Yeah.
it'll work for you, Juliet, but I recently helped my daughter, or a year ago, helped her prepare for the SHSAT, which is what for the New York selective schools. And we used a trick because she was trying to get above a certain grade on the practice test. And so what we did was we went back and we highlighted, just with a simple yellow highlighter, all the questions she got wrong. And she took a practice test, a time practice test, consisting entirely of the questions she got wrong, and it really boosted her confidence, because she then, we basically constructed a Frankenstein test, that was the normal length but constructed entirely of things she got wrong in the first time around, and she did really well on it, and that really boosted her confidence. So I don't know if it would work for the SAT, but I also put in the chat window, I just did a simple Google search. I'm sure you're way more tech savvy than I am, for the best SAT prep books. And I put that in the chat window, and there was someone had posted a blog. And I do think using an old-fashioned paper book might be better for prep than purely online. I think I think there's something about paper that can focus you, even if you're very young. So anyway, those are
Thank you
2
so
little
much.
bits of advice that I use with my kids for high school test prep, and they work
Yeah, that's
well.
great. Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Anybody else? Jim, I see Jim had his hand up. He can put it back down, so maybe
Yes.
his question was
Chris,
already answered. Yes,
thanks so much.
of course.
I'd be interested in your comments for a recent college graduate with maybe 4 or 5 years experience in the financial sector applying to the top MBA programs.
Yes, as Chris mentioned, the Harvard Business Review Ascend website is dripping, as they say, publishing every 3 or 4 days a video by me answering a question that they asked me. And they started out asking 3 or 4, and by the time they finished answering their questions, I had made 17 videos. So it's going to be, in effect, a short course on successful MBA applications. There, too, one of the important things is to start early, and I would especially recommend taking the GMAT, because it's very difficult. I do advise MBA candidates as well as college applicants. It's very difficult on people when they have their hearts and minds set on certain schools. They've even written the essays, and they find out that they're in trouble with the GMAT. So many people take 6 months to get their GMAT score up to the level that they need for whatever schools they aspire to. So my first piece of advice would be take the GMAT right now.
Do you see a difference in the GRE versus the GMAT in terms of admissions?
The schools say they will take either one. And the GRE is becoming an increasingly popular test. I saw in the news this week that even certain law schools have decided to accept the GRE rather than the LSAT. And the way to find out whether this person will score higher on the GRE or the GMAT is to take a sample test of each one. In the end, it takes less time to do that than to go down the rabbit hole on the internet trying to decide theoretically which test would be better for you. Take both of them and then compare the results on a percentile score chart.
Okay, thank you. I'll have a look at the Harvard videos.
Great. I think we have time for 2 more questions. If there's anyone out there who would like to ask, I want to make sure we give everyone that opportunity. If anybody is having trouble unmuting, I think I'm going to take a little risk here and unmute all. But if we get a lot of background noise, I may need to remute all. So I'm going to unmute all and just give everyone a chance. So everyone's unmuted now. So speak up now if you have a question. Nobody yet. Okay, going once, going twice.
I have some observations. Oh, okay,
Oh,
Danny.
here we go.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I have a question. If it's too loud where I am, let me know and I will stop. But, my question is, for at least in our circumstance, our children are growing up in a pretty privileged way, but we felt it best for them to go to public school, even though all of our friends who have a similar income or whatever send their kids to private school. We both went to public school before going to Princeton, and we were able to get into Princeton, and we feel like that was a good experience for us, and so we want our children to have the same experience. But we also want to believe that a school will look just as favorably upon
Danny, I think did we lose you?
us.
I think we lost Danny's audio for some reason.
Oh, sorry.
Oh, are you back? Okay, he's back. Okay.
Oh, did you miss my question or did you hear it? I'm sorry.
We heard it up to you'd like to think that the schools will look on, and I imagine you were going to say we'll look on a public school education.
Yeah.
With on the same level as a private school.
Yes, I mean I feel like if a student is just as smart and performing just as well on tests and grades and so on, that hopefully being at one school versus another, a private school versus a public school wouldn't weigh very much, but maybe you could comment.
I think that basically you are correct, that the admissions committee looks at the school record in light of the school the person attended. So they would want to see that your children have chosen the most rigorous classes that were available to them. They can't take classes that weren't offered. If either of your children has shown a particular talent and has exhausted what's available at their public school, there are other things that they can do that would be seen favorably. These days, just about everything is on Coursera and it's free. So, I mean, people can take the most legendary class in computer science at Harvard for free online. I'm not suggesting that your children have to do that, which would be seen as torture by a lot of people, but there are other things that they can do beyond school to explore possible interests and to demonstrate a level of mastery that might go beyond, as I had said earlier, beyond the walls of their school, no matter what school they're at.
All right, we have time for just one more question.
Just a quickie.
Yeah.
I'm concerned about ED versus EA. If we go ED, we're locked into that school. We don't know about the financial aid. If we go EA, it might be better. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Okay, I'm going to mute all, and then that'll be the last answer, but we're getting some background noise. So let
I
me
suggest that you think of.
Wait, I got to unmute you, Dr. Corcoran. So sorry. Here we go.
I suggest that you think about ED and EA from the university's point of view. What's in it for them? What's in it for you? The acceptance rates under ED are higher because there's something in it for the university. Their yield is 100%. That is the number of acceptances over the number of offers. It's 100%. You're coming. So there is a bit of a boost there that is kind of lacking because there's little incentive for the university to make an early action offer. In terms of financial aid, it's supposed to be the case that you get the same offer in early decision as you would get in the regular round. The difference is, it's true that another school might have offered you more money. You can try negotiating with your early decision school after you get the acceptance, but you have to sign that it is a binding acceptance.
Thank you so much, Dr. Corcoran. This was incredibly useful. As someone with now high school age kids, I learned so much today. I want to just remember common data set. That's one of the big takeaways here, that maybe I'm in the minority of Ivy League alumni, but I had no clue what that was until this evening. So common data set is really important to know, and many other useful things that you shared. So again, we'll be posting this on the IvyLife website in the next couple of days for those that missed it, or if you want to watch it again. And we'll also have Dr. Corcoran back live on Thursday, September 19th in Midtown Manhattan for a live session. I think she'll probably cover additional topics and answer different questions. So if don't feel like you shouldn't come to that also if you attended this webinar. And I'll give the last word to Dr. Corcoran if you have any last words.
There's a lot of useful information in my book, Year by Year to College, which is available on Amazon.com and all the national Amazon sites. It breaks things down into bite-sized chunks so that things don't suddenly become overwhelming in 12th grade. So I'd love to hear from any of you, and wish you all the very best of luck in your applications.
I'm going to order that book tonight. Thank you, Dr. Corcoran. So thank you for everyone who attended. I think you asked excellent questions, and they were answered excellently as well. So I'm going to stop the recording now and just thank everybody for participating this evening.